Hi, I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics and Fantastic Four Grand Design, and welcome to Thursday Comics. Here we are with Journey into Mystery number 90. It's the first issue that doesn't feature Jack Kirby on the interior, penciling duties. We do have a nice Kirby cover, inked apparently by Dick Ayers. And really nice cover introduction of the carbon copy man. Cool looking creature design. We've seen this sort of crystalline monster creature in other Jack Kirby comics prior to this, in some of his 50s science fiction stories that he did for DC Comics. And now here he is in this. Just because Jack Kirby is not listed as a contributor on the interiors at this period at Marvel Comics, it's entirely possible that Jack Kirby, contributed to the plot, co-wrote the plot with Stan Lee in some of their, plotting sessions, and just, wasn't able to draw it, and it was handed off to somebody else. The fact that it has a Jack Kirby drawn cover means that in most cases the covers were drawn before the interior story was created, was written, or whatever. So the first piece of writing and creating that happens in a lot of these cases is, what's the next issue going to be? Let's come up with a cover, and then we'll figure out the story later. So you're sort of figuring out the story on the cover. So it seems to me Kirby's creating this, with Stan Lee creating the carbon copy man concept, creating this sort of character design, this creature design, and then these sort of secondary characters. And when you get to the comic itself, you see a very watered down, much less impactful version of that character, which is often the case. So I highly doubt that Jack Kirby saw this drawing and these drawings and said, hey, let me make this really cool stuff. I think he made these really cool designs, and then this is Al Hartley's attempt to approximate those designs or create his own spin on them. So this is the first issue that's not drawn by Kirby, and this sort of thing is exactly what kind of dropped the hints that maybe Kirby's contribution is more than just illustrator, because I'd be reading like some of the 60s Captain America stories and Tales from Suspense, or like a story like this where it's like the series is cooking, it's so good, the stories are great, everything's great, and then all of a sudden Jack Kirby's not quote unquote drawing the issue. How come, just because it's got a different artist, how come all of a sudden the story isn't so great? It went from being great issue after issue to being not great. I understand if the drawings aren't as nice, if Thor doesn't look as cool, if the settings aren't as clearly defined visually, character designs aren't as interesting. I understand that. I understand that the action scenes might not be as exciting because my understanding of as a kid of the Marvel method is that the artist is sort of choreographing the action sequences, which is why these sort of, Marvel things were sort of more action driven. The general story just seems very unfocused. We have the mighty Thor trapped by the carbon copy man. And, we have these aliens show up, another standard alien invasion storyline. Now, this is a new development. The soap opera is getting ratcheted up a notch. Other men reveal their feelings. Why don't I? Why don't I just up and tell Jane that I love her? What am I afraid of? Blast it. Am I a man or a mouse? So he stamps his thing and he decides he's going to tell Jane Foster who he is. Now, it also doesn't preclude that Jack was involved in sort of the plotting session that leads to this story. It's entirely possible that he's discussing this story in broad strokes with Stan Lee and then is unable to draw it, so it gets handed off to Al Hartley to draw. He's about to tell her, and then crack-a-boom, an off-model version of Odin shows up, and heed my words, Lord of Thunder, you are bound never to reveal your identity to any other mortal. I have spoken. So it's not for lack of trying. It's not because he doesn't want to tell her, but the big boss tells him he can't. So now we're seeing a lot of strange behavior going on in the city. People acting in odd ways. He comes back to the office and Jane's acting weird. And now he gets a summons for treating charity patients. It says it's against the law. The people down at City Hall must have lost their senses. No, they are perfectly right. What? You too? You have no business treating people without charge. If they're too poor to pay, you should let them remain sick. They deserve to be ill. Oh man, this hurts. This little speech by Jane is there's people out there who in public office who feel this way. This feels like a very Randian speech she's giving almost something you'd see in a Steve Ditko book, like I could see The Question or somebody giving this kind of speech. I refuse to work for a soft-hearted fool, especially when he's a quack who doesn't know the first thing about medicine. Goodbye. So yeah, really interesting speech there. Really interesting the way it resonates today, and I'm sure the similar arguments were being made back then. The engagement is off. Honey, I want a divorce. Thor shows up at City Hall to investigate, and now the mayor is calling for his arrest. It's Thor versus cops. Kind of the thing you would see in early Batman stories, or like Batman Year One or whatever, or Spider-Man or whatever. I don't know that Thor ever this had a phase where he was like pursued by the police. A recipe for interesting superhero stories. So we get a little taste of that here. He's remembering back to when Odin was talking to him, and I guess one of his brothers or cousins or half-brothers who looks pretty much like him, just a little sterner, telling him about, what to do in this situation, in a tough situation. Ask Dad, what would Dad say? Based on his remembrance of Odin's advice, he sort of realizes that, okay, it's the reason these people aren't acting like themselves is because, use Occam's razor. They just aren't themselves. So he does a thorough search of the city, looks around, finds a spaceship, gets magnetically attached to it, and then out come the alien. These, very, generic. I mean, look at the design. It's the same basic design as Kirby's, but just somehow, Kirby's guys wear it well, and he sees that they're shape-shifting aliens, and they're taking they can even take the shape of Don Blake. They capture Jane and the mayor. Don Blake seems like he's sold out Thor. He says, "You let me go, I'll find Thor for you." And they're like, "How could you do this? How could you sell Thor out that way?" And so he goes, he finds his hammer, grabs it. Now he's Thor. And then one of the guys turns into the crystal monster, who we thought was going to be the sort of titular carbon copy man from the cover. A formidable fight. You can sort of imagine the Kirby version of this. And yes, I mean, all respect to Al Hartley, not up to the challenge. I mean, Kirby's the greatest, so what are you going to do? You just do your best. So then the carbon copy man takes on another form. He takes a form of a gladiator, somebody more well-equipped to take on Thor. He's got his net, he's got his sword. He can't hold a candle to the real thing. Now Thor's squaring off with their boss, the guy with the biggest mustache. They save their greatest trick for last. They can turn invisible. They're invisible. They're taking sucker punches at Thor, beating him up. He can't see a thing. He's helpless. Kind of a fun this is a fun idea. So he strikes lightning, starts the storm and the rain. It's like the Chevy Chase Invisible Man movie, Memoirs of an Invisible Man. When it's raining, you can kind of make out the outline of the Invisible Man because it's wherever the rain's not quite hitting. And Thor uses that nice, superhero science solution. Starts knocking out the bad guys, catches them in a net, and whoosh, throws them off into space. Thor's no murderer, at least so far. He's not a murderer, and so he's confident in the knowledge that this space armada will, go rescue that guy. So what do we do about the rest of the guys who are still here? The armada has left to go, chase this guy and rescue him. They'll be out of our hair at least for a while. And they'll think twice before messing around with the planet Earth again. What do we do with these other guys? And so we have a solution that was used earlier in Fantastic Four #2, the first appearance of the Skrulls, where at the end of that story, Reed Richards hypnotizes the Skrulls into turning into cows. So they'll remain shapeshifted into cows up until that storyline gets resurrected, I think, by like Neil Adams and Roy Thomas, 8 years later. So they do a similar thing here. Thor tells them, I want you guys to turn into trees. If you surrender and turn into trees, you'll be okay. So they turn into trees. And then Jane's like, well, they're shapeshifters. They could turn back from trees anytime they want. And Thor's like, well, no, because other times they turned into people or monsters with, thinking, the ability to think, the ability to reason. They've turned into trees. And so trees don't have the ability to think, the ability to reason. And so they'll stay that way forever. Problem solved. Feeling very at home. It would feel very at home in a DC comic of the time. But and then we have the little wrap up where Jane asks. Jane says, Thor says that you were helping him when it looked like you were, screwing him over. Seems a little odd to me, but I guess I'll take his word for it. Don Blake says, well, don't be too disappointed in me. After all, Jane, we can't all be as brave as Thor. And he does the little Jack Benny look at the viewer or at the reader. And there we have it. Another Thor comic. Again, I have my opinions about it. Not a great comic, not a very memorable comic. Probably something I'll never read again, unlike the other, the Kirby ones. But, no slight against Al Hartley. He's doing his best. It's just, these are ephemera. These are ephemeral pop culture items from the previous century. And, most of them are not worth your time. Jack Kirby transcended the limitations of his art form, of his time, and of the industry that he worked in, and created timeless masterpieces. So there you have it. Join me next Thursday for Journey into Mystery number 91. And again, we got another Kirby drawn cover with not Kirby drawn interiors. This time it'll be Joe Sinnott. There's going to be a lot to discuss there. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics and Fantastic Four Grand Design, and I'll see you next Thursday.